Welcome to The Lab.
Hi, Mom. What's going on, all of you brainiacs out there, and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Laboratory. I am your host, Tik Tok, Shane Palma, joined as always by Spitfire Lucas Parrish.
What's going on, guys?
And the chemist, Jack McGrath.
Shane, how are we doing today?
It has been a very, very, very long time coming. The amount of tweets, outreach responses on Instagram, on TikTok from people asking when, if we would ever be coming back. Well, here's your answer.
We're back.
We are back.
We're back, baby.
We are back in the laboratory with a whole new setup. For those of you watching us on video, you can see the wonderful array of jerseys around us, the nice flags, the hanging decor. But if you're, of course, a podcast listener, our valuable podcast listeners, we are still here to give you the same great fantasy football insight that we have been for the past few years.
How
It's
cool
crazy.
is it that we're on video now? I have to
I like the
contain
video.
myself.
I know.
What's up, guys? How's it going, video
I was just
world?
messing with my computer, and I was like, "Oh, someone's watching."
Someone's
I
watching.
had to
Someone's
brush my
watching.
hair before we did a podcast today.
I ironed the
Wow.
shirt.
I threw on a hat.
There you go. See, it's an ever-changing world, and I'm just very excited to be talking fantasy football again. I at least have had quite a few drafts up until this point.
Yeah.
We have had our big draft. Our rosters are set. Well, not really, because I'm already in the midst of making a potential groundbreaking trade
King of trades.
of
As
Christian
always.
McCaffrey, because why not?
Why not?
I draft 2 days ago, and I would already trade Christian McCaffrey
Why
away,
not?
because that's the world of fantasy
I already
football.
traded for Najee Harris.
That's how it goes.
So,
that's
you know?
that's what makes fantasy football so great. So today we are going to break down the best and really the worst values of each round, probably through round 9 or 10 of your fantasy football draft. Now, every league is different. I typically play full PPR, 12-person league. This is the ADP, and these are the players that we're going off of for that. Just overall general consensus of what we're looking at here. Many of you might play in 8-team leagues, like Lucas for some reason plays in an 8-team league.
We don't have enough people from back home.
Okay,
who like
that's
football.
fair.
I was a theater kid in high school. Nobody likes sports in theater.
That's fair. I'm sure there's some of you out there that also play in 8-team leagues. So for you, there might be an amazing value in every single round, and you don't even know it. But we're going to highlight some of the guys that I've seen, especially in the hundreds and hundreds of mocks that I've done up until this point, and in some of the real drafts that I've done where the value just keeps on falling to me, and I love reaping the rewards of that. But before we get underway, I want to talk about Underdog. That's right.
Oh, well done.
For those of you on video, there is a flag right behind me, and that is UnderdogFantasy.com. And right now, if you are a new user and sign up with code FFLAB, that's our code.
That's our code.
FFLAB.
LAB.
Underdog Fantasy will match your first deposit up to $100. Not only that,
Wow.
if you DM us on Twitter, maybe you can comment on TikTok, you want to DM us on Instagram, as soon as you sign up and make your first deposit, you can join one of our leagues.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to compete against us? This was the best way to do it. So many people reach out every single year. Shane, Lab, we got to get into. We want to do a league. We want to do a league. And
Everybody always wants to do leagues.
Everyone wants to do a
right?
league. Of
Leagues
course,
are the fun part. Drafts are the fun part.
Drafts are
gosh.
great. So really, Underdog Fantasy is the best of that. It is best ball format, so it takes the best parts of the draft and takes away all the stress of everything else. So instead of your typical running the waiver wire, waking up at 5 a.m. every Wednesday to see who you got, or trying to figure out some of these ludicrous trades and swamp through all that stuff, you just draft a team and that's it.
And all that's fun. It's a part of fantasy
It's
football.
fun.
But 3 max. I mean, 3 of those leagues. That even 3 gets
It's a lot to
overwhelming.
manage.
It
is.
But the fun part is drafting. But mock drafts aren't satisfying.
They're not.
There's
They're
nothing
not.
you get out of a mock draft.
But a best ball draft, you get to see exactly where other people's minds are at when they're putting their money on the line. That's when exactly you know how you should be drafting for the big ones, for the big drafts that you have. So UnderdogFantasy.com, you can download the app. It's available on the App Store and on Android. Use the code FFLAB and join us. But let's end it there. Let's get to some of the best and worst values for each round, and we'll start with round 1. And this is someone that, we'll talk about different positions, obviously different players, different teams, but there's one guy that going into draft season, I did a best ball draft, and I took him first overall.
Wow.
I took him first overall.
Wow.
Christian McCaffrey's on this list, but it's not him. The best value for me in fantasy football drafts in round 1 is Justin Jefferson. I am under the full belief that Justin Jefferson is not only the best value in drafts, but he is that because he's the best player you can draft.
Well,
he is the safest. I mean, obviously we're gonna talk because Cooper Kupp is and should be in this conversation, coming off of the historic season that he had last year. But really, Justin Jefferson, what he brings to the table, running back position aside, because of all the injuries and everything with Jonathan Taylor and everything like that, obviously he's healthy and he's had a phenomenal last season, but some people don't think he's going to repeat that this year, just with the less touches that he might receive in that Colts offense. Justin Jefferson just absolutely, to me, blows everyone else out of the water from a ceiling and floor standpoint.
When was the last time the number 1 drafted running back ended as the RB1?
At least 10 years ago.
I mean, it doesn't happen.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. I mean, now same could be said for wide receiver, right? It's not often the wide receiver 1 repeats, but risk for injuries goes down when it's a wide receiver. Justin Jefferson, you were saying, what, 23 years old?
23 years old.
23 years old. Wow. He's got a lot ahead of him. A lot ahead of him. And he's already been, arguably the best receiver in the league last year. And this year he's going into, is this year 4 in the league for him? Year 3? Year 4?
Jack, can you want to... Is this
year 3? No, this is year 4.
Year 4. Year 4 for...
No, it's year 3.
It's year 3.
He was the
3.
Yeah. CD Lamb, year 3, year 2. Yeah, that just shows you right there how polished he already is as a wide receiver. When you forget how long he's been in the league and how good he really looks.
And you know who was picked right above him and is also in his 3rd year? Jalen Reagor was
Jalen
picked
Reagor,
above him.
newly
Who's now
traded
on
to
the
the
Vikings
Minnesota
as well,
Vikings.
which
That's
is quite hilarious. And I don't think that affects Justin Jefferson's value at all. Justin Jefferson. I personally take Kupp over Jefferson still, just because I think the volume's there. The Stafford injury obviously is concerning.
That's what concerns me most.
And that's kind of where you want to go. But the Vikings are going for it. I mean, they're making moves. They're dishing out draft picks. With Devontae Adams out of the division and now not that presumed number 1 fantasy wide receiver, the NFC North's somewhat wide open, and it looks like the Vikings are trying to take advantage with that trade.
I like Jefferson. I like him a lot. He's my number 1.
Kevin O'Connell is the new head coach for the Minnesota Vikings. The past 2 years before he joined that staff, he was the offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. A few weeks ago, Justin Jefferson came out in an interview and said how much O'Connell has really brought to this team, to this offense, and how he really saw how Cooper Kupp was getting open on a lot of those plays, and how... he's been beating everyone in training camp. There really hasn't been anyone that's been able to match what Justin Jefferson is doing in training camp. It's just a matter of seeing him now in year 3 in real games. And maybe he doesn't repeat what Cooper Kupp did last year just because of how crazy and ludicrous that was.
That's
and how
an anomaly of a season.
It really was. Mm-hmm. And just how much he was fed the ball. But Justin Jefferson should be a lock for double-digit touchdowns. He should be a lock for over 1,000 receiving yards.
He should be a lock for over 1,300 receiving yards.
Yeah, he really is. And obviously Adam Thielen's still there, and the comeback of Irv Smith Jr. and KJ Osborne possibly having an emergence of a role in this offense. None of that worries me. Justin Jefferson, is seriously locked in as one of the best picks, if not the best pick.
Do you have him as number 1 in your rankings? Period?
I do.
You have him as number 1, period?
I do. It's him, Jonathan Taylor, and then Christian McCaffrey.
Well, I don't hate it. I don't have it, but I don't hate it.
It's just, listen, running back position, and we'll talk about Christian McCaffrey now.
I don't hate it.
Because Christian McCaffrey, for me, for a while in this offseason, was outside of my top 5 running backs. Why? He was outside my top 5 running backs.
Why?
The ick. We have the ick for Christian McCaffrey. Everybody has the ick for Christian McCaffrey.
I'm still a Christian McCaffrey lover.
He fell in our draft to 6. People have the ick for him.
I know, and that doesn't make sense to me. So Christian McCaffrey, every single year that he's played, has been far and away the best fantasy asset that you could have. And he's had a couple of injuries, and I understand that. But Derrick Henry went over him in our draft. Derrick Henry is coming off a foot injury, and I know it's not an injury that repeats often, but he's also seen a lot more touches than Christian McCaffrey, and he's nearing his age 30 season. I think you look at Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler's going to be in a
20 touchdowns last year. I don't think he repeats
that. No way he repeats that.
I'm looking at the draft board. Najee Harris.
Najee didn't go above him because Shane traded up.
Oh, I see. But
Najee went at 8.
That's going to be one of those picks that's going to be in the top 5 that people would consider above him if you're putting him in your top 5. Najee Harris, new quarterback. Do you really trust the Steelers?
My top five at that time was Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, and Joe Mixon. Now, for me, Christian McCaffrey has jumped all of those except Jonathan Taylor.
Yep.
There's a fantastic article done by Bleacher Report that was posted about 2 weeks ago that after reading it, just changed my perspective on everything. Obviously, the injuries are real.
Yeah.
Christian McCaffrey has missed 23 games over the last 2 seasons. But when you really look at the numbers here, he's like truly elite. I want to just make sure I get this right.
30 points per game.
There was some. I want to be sure I see this right. You guys can continue the conversation while I look for the stat, but it was
Christian
mind-boggling.
McCaffrey. Even last year, the 2 games he played,
He was ridiculous.
he dropped like 30 points each of those games. He was coming off an injury, dropped 30 points. He got injured in that game, came off another injury, 30 points. It's unbelievable.
So in his career, Christian McCaffrey has averaged just under 22.5 PPR points per game. Over his career, he's averaged that. That's more than any other running back in modern history.
Yeah.
That includes LaDainian Tomlinson and Marshall Faulk.
LaDainian Tomlinson, that was a little bit before our time, but I've heard that he was a fantasy cheat code.
That just shows you how valuable Christian McCaffrey really is, not only to a fantasy team, but really to the Carolina Panthers.
Yep,
because
absolutely.
Besides those 23 games, when healthy over the last 2 seasons, Christian McCaffrey's also averaged over 21 touches per game. 21 touches per game, which is just absolutely crazy. And obviously the offense has changed. He's gone through now a lot of quarterback change over the past, a lot of turnover in that Carolina offense. From Cam Newton to Sam Darnold to Teddy Bridgewater, back to Cam Newton, now we're at Baker Mayfield, right? What do we expect with Baker Mayfield at the helm? Can McCaffrey still return that same value that he's had? Because it's been the dump-off machine. That's really where he's made his money.
Well, here's where the Panthers have gone the past couple of years, and it's kind of like the NBA treatment. Get the ball to your superstar and let him cook. And that's what it's been with Christian McCaffrey. They get the ball to him because he's their best player and he makes guys miss.
Absolutely.
So give the ball to him and let him do what he does. I see no reason to change that strategy. Their offense is completely different when he's on the field. He's a game breaker. When you give him the ball, he gets 5 yards nearly every single time he touches it. If he's breaking tackles, he's making guys miss. His speed is still ridiculous. All of those tools are still there for Christian McCaffrey, which is why I think they're going to continue to give him those touches. And just the point on the LaDainian Tomlinson thing earlier, Lucas, do you know how many touchdowns he scored in 2006?
I do not.
31. It's the single season NFL record.
He scored 31 touchdowns in a season.
Really,
Christian McCaffrey still averages more points per game over his career than Tomlinson only played like 7 or 8 years, right?
Something like that. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head.
hopefully Christian McCaffrey can play more than that and at least play a fully healthy season.
He's due, right?
The problem
He's due.
with McCaffrey compared to another safe player that we're not going to hit on too much, but Dalvin Cook. And Jack, you were on this very early, but I do think Dalvin Cook is one of the safer players you can draft in the first round, mainly because of Alexander Mattison. There are few backup running backs in the league that can replicate their starting running backs' production when they're actually healthy and on the field.
Yep.
However, what we saw with Madison, and going as late as they are, obviously Kareem Hunt and A.J. Dillon, those are different stories. Those are more compliments than really handcuffs.
I messed up in our draft. I have Aaron Jones. I was thinking I need to handcuff A.J. Dillon. I thought I'd be able to get him in the 7th. No chance that happened.
A.J. Dillon, and we're going to get to A.J. Dillon because he's one of the better values you can get right now. But when it comes to Dalvin Cook and that production that we're seeing from Alexander Mattison, as long as he doesn't get traded, really he becomes one of the safer picks in the draft, as long as you can secure his backup. Because if something were to happen to Dalvin Cook, which we've seen him get bit by the injury bug numerous times, hopefully he stays well this year.
That's
as I touch his jersey, as I touch the jersey here because I drafted him last night. Madison can replicate what he does.
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
Dalvin Cook missed games last year, Alexander Mattison scored over 18 fantasy points in PPR every single game. Every single game, he was given over 22 touches per game and produced in every single opportunity when given the chance.
I'd argue if you're in a 12-team league and you have a top 5 pick, if Jonathan Taylor gets hurt, your season's like nearly, it's not over, but I mean, it's pretty close to being
Nyheim
over.
Hines won't be the 3-down back.
Nyheim Hines
there
is not
is,
the guy.
and there is no Chuba Hubbard, Deontay Foreman, whoever it is. I don't care.
Exactly. None
There
of
is
those
no
guys.
running back on that roster that can replicate who Christian McCaffrey is.
Yep.
There is no that's
Derrick
the,
Henry
that's
is
what-
the same
Derrick-
way.
Exactly.
Deontay Foreman had some weeks
And
last
I forget
year,
if he's
but
on the Titans or
he's
even
on
on
the
Panthers
Panthers
fan, right?
Yep.
Literally, like when it comes down to the core of that, your draft that, and that's why I like drafting a wide receiver like Justin Jefferson when I can, because I do truly believe that, and if I'm really handcuffing a wide receiver, I'll get KJ Osborne around 13, 14. I don't care.
Yep.
But when it comes to that running back position, again, you really can't find a backup, unlike Alexander Madison, that can replicate exactly what your starting running back can give you.
I don't think he's going to be on the team, though. That's my big issue.
12 teams, it was like a report of
12
like 12
teams
called
with interest, and the assumed value is they could maybe get as high as a third or fourth round pick for him. He wants to start somewhere.
He is a starter.
One of the rumors I've heard. And he has the talent to do that. He's on a contract here, so it makes sense that he'd want to go start somewhere. And there's a two-headed monster in that backfield of young guys coming up, so at the moment, Alexander Madison, I think, I'm going to say, do you guys think he has more value as Dalvin Cook's handcuff?
What?
Or if he goes and starts and shares carries somewhere?
If he starts and shares
Because where is he this set starter right now? Which team
possibly
in the NFL?
Houston.
Maybe Washington now with the Brian Robinson?
Washington probably best case scenario for him. Other destinations, I'm sure San Francisco is called. Because I'm sure they aren't sold on Mitchell, and them naming Trey Sermon as the backup doesn't give me any, comfortability with that at all.
Yeah.
That any running back in that room is safe.
I saw on Bleacher Report today too. Apparently, the Bears aren't completely settled with Montgomery.
They aren't. That's why I like Khalil Herbert, because I absolutely expect him to have a decent role.
There are quite a few teams. You could even listen. The Chiefs. I don't think they ended up cutting Ronald Jones, but the Chiefs could just be another team that's interested to add a compliment, because Pacheco really. I don't think
Bills
he's going to be much. I don't want to say the Bills, because I feel like the Bills have enough where they have Singletary and Moss and Cook there right now. But let's talk about the second round. I feel like we've spent enough time on some of those guys
on the
first round. So we'll move quickly through some of these middle rounds here so we can get to some of the later guys. Second round, the two players that I named as some of the best values that you can get are Saquon Barkley and CeeDee Lamb. Now I'll start quickly with CeeDee. Some people aren't quite sold on him yet. Jack, you just kind of made a wince there.
No, I was wincing at Saquon Barkley.
Oh,
CeeDee Lamb I'm okay with, yeah.
CeeDee Lamb, I think, and we'll talk about Saquon. CeeDee Lamb, I think, is ready for that third-year emergence that we've talked about.
I love CeeDee Lamb. He's my wide receiver 4.
He's my wide receiver 5. Schultz, obviously going to be a factor in this offense. James Washington wasn't going to be much. He just got placed on IR. He's out the first 4 weeks.
When Gallup comes back.
Gallup won't be placed on the IR, but he should be coming back. But he's really just a number 2 in this offense.
Clear.
They traded Amari Cooper. For what I saw, Amari Cooper was traded for less than what the Vikings traded for. Like, the Vikings got more for Reagor.
Yeah, Vikings.
Than the Cowboys got for Amari Cooper. Which
Vikings gave more for Reagor.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's that? I mean, that's like wild to me, just how they viewed Amari Cooper in that sense, and how they were so ready to move on to the future with CeeDee Lamb being their top guy.
I was saying this when CeeDee Lamb was drafted. He has the talent of being the number 1 wide receiver in the league. I absolutely think that's not out of the question for this season for him.
In his first season, 13.6 PPR points per game, 14.6 as a sophomore. Basically went from a mid wide receiver 3 to a mid wide receiver 2. I think this year, at the very least, a mid wide receiver 1.
Absolutely,
definitely in the cards.
It'll be the third year break.
Third year leap, baby. We do like the third year leap.
Saquon Barkley, Jack. That's who you made the wins for.
I don't know if he's the best value in the second round. I agree. He has the potential. But once again, you have to trust the Giants' offense, which is just straight up still so many parts away from being any level of productive. I don't know if he has enough end zone opportunities to be an RB1 this year. I think he'll see the touches. There's no doubt about that. But I just don't know if he's going to have that production with the touches.
No, guys I definitely like more in the second are going to be guys like DeAndre Swift, Javonte Williams. You're definitely gonna like Aaron Jones more.
Aaron Jones, I think, is a top.
I think that's a fair.
You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that for a second with Aaron Jones. So Aaron Jones is in a spot where even with AJ Dillon, and this is where the drop off with Aaron Jones comes, is people are scared of AJ Dillon dipping into carries. Well, let's lay it out a little bit. Yeah, Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon are probably going to split. But Aaron Jones has split carries for his entire career. First it was Jamal Williams, then it was A.J. Dillon, and A.J. Dillon was there last year and the year before as well. Aaron Jones has always split carries. The past few years, Aaron Jones has still been a top 5 running back, even with him splitting carries. If we talk about injury risk, that's really never been a huge factor with Aaron Jones. He's generally been able to stay on the field, which I don't like to put a lot of stock into that. but generally he's pretty safe.
He's had some games missed over the past. He hasn't been fully healthy every single year, but he has had some games missed. Where Dylan last year did take over in some of those games and prove that he can be a number one running back.
Great. And now Adam Koffler of Rotoballer tweeted this. This caught my eye a few months ago. He tweeted this a few months ago. So Aaron Jones has played about 8 games without Devontae Adams. I mean, there's like games where Devontae Adams has exited or Aaron Jones came in later due to injury or things like that. In the last 3 seasons, they played about 8 games. In those 8 games, Jones averaged 7 targets per game. His average in other games was 4 targets per game. I think he's going to have a bigger role in the receiving game. The Packers don't have receivers right now, so I think they're going to spread A.J. Dillon or Aaron Jones out wide because both of them are good receiving talents. I think there's going to be more work in the passing game for both of these guys, and I think Aaron Jones is still going to have his work cut out for him in the rushing game, and that's why I'm taking him. I would take him in the first round. He's dropping to the second round right now.
So you're taking him over Najee Harris?
Yes.
But not over Dalvin Cook.
Not over Dalvin Cook.
Because those two are in the same range when it comes to...
I would still take Harris above Jones. That being said, I'm definitely too low on Jones. I've got Jones as my RB12, but that's...
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not that. I have Jones as...
I've got him... Look, and a lot of that is just because of my love for Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, and Javonte Williams. And a lot of that has to... Why I'm so high on those 3 in particular is because I think there are opportunities to be the RB1 or number 1. And so I'm taking swings on them. I understand that they're a little bit riskier, but I also want to take that swing for the RB1 because I don't play for playoffs. I play to win.
But what takes Saquon Barkley out of that conversation?
He is. He is absolutely. What takes him out of that conversation for me is exactly what Jack said. It's the lack of Giants who. I mean, it's the not very good offense on the Giants. I know their O-line is better, but
it hasn't. Listen, they added Neal, which I think
they have a much better head coach.
Improvement.
Finally, they have a good head coach. I think.
There's no. Matt Breed is the backup. There is no competition for Saquon Barkley this year. There's also no reason why Saquon Barkley can't average more targets than Aaron Jones in that Giants offense.
He has in the past.
Whoever the quarterback is, because they also don't have very many wide receivers there. Sterling Shepard's still recovering from the injury. It looks like he won't be put on the IR, so he should be back relatively soon. Kadarius Toney, obviously one of everyone's favorite sleepers once you get past round 8 there. And Kenny Galladay, who I hate. I don't think he'll be much of anything. But I still did draft him in the last round last night of one of the drafts that I did just because why not?
If you get him in the last round, he's shown before. He could be a top receiver. Yeah, it's like if he could be one of those stories where it's like, oh, suddenly Kenny Galladay's comeback player of the year and you get a steal late in the round. My question for you, though, Lucas, is what makes you more comfortable with Javonte Williams taking over an RB1 role in Denver, which I would say he's more on the RB1 track, but having a larger share of carries in Denver over Melvin Gordon, who they brought back this year, versus Aaron Jones having a larger share of carries over A.J.
Aaron
Dillon.
Jones is going to have a larger share of carries than A.J. Dillon. I feel very confident in that. And I think he should probably also have more receptions. He's more of a receiving back, but A.J. Dillon, they have been working him a lot in the receiving games. I'm not totally sure about that. I am more concerned about an Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon split than I am a Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon split. In large part because Melvin Gordon himself has come out and said, look, I'm the clear number 2. He's come out in an interview and said, I'm the number 2 in this offense. I understand that. Javonte Williams, when he played last year and Melvin Gordon was out, was unbelievable. Unbelievable. When Melvin Gordon was in, Javonte Williams was still putting up mid-tier RB3 numbers. Javonte Williams is someone who I really think is on track for an absolute breakout season. In my opinion, when he played, he was the best rookie running back last year, and I absolutely expect that to continue. I love Javonte Williams. Now, I have him below Harrison Swift for that reason. Melvin Gordon's there. There's a little bit of concern.
It's the touchdowns, right? Because when you look at Melvin Gordon, he has at least 9 total touchdowns in each of the last 6 seasons.
Absolutely. And that, you know what? I think he's still going to be used at the goal line a decent amount for sure.
He is. I mean, Melvin Gordon, I would still say is still going maybe 2 rounds ahead of Madison, but he is also one of those guys that if something were to happen to Javonte, you plug him right in and he becomes a top 10 running back. He still has that talent.
I think he has standalone value too. That's the thing.
He does have standalone value.
You play in a flex.
Yes, absolutely.
I think there's a chance of that, but I don't think that. I think I really think it's going to be 2/3, 1/3 split at the most.
Let's talk about 2 more wide receivers as we head into round 3. Michael Pittman Jr., who's probably my favorite player to be drafting. I'm touting him as this year's Calvin Ridley. I was all over Calvin Ridley a few years ago.
You were.
That was that 3rd-year breakout. I was extremely high on Ridley. I had him inside my top 5. I don't have Pittman inside my top 5. He's currently my wide receiver 8.
Yeah.
But I truly believe Matt Ryan now at the helm, the best quarterback he's ever played with. He's entering that 3rd year. He wears number 11. My gosh, it's the Julio year for Michael Pittman Jr.
I don't hate it.
I think he's going to break out. I think he has amazing value right now. He's being faded in some leagues all the way to the 4th round. But I also have A.J. Brown on here, who's a very controversial name.
Yep.
I want to throw it to you guys as your thoughts on maybe questioning why I put him here, or maybe you agree that I have him here as a decent value in round 3.
As a 3rd round guy, I think the ceiling's higher than any other receiver you're going to find in the 3rd round. So that's why I like this. I think he's a boom or bust pick at this point, right? Because, yes, he could produce a ridiculous amount with Jalen Hurts, and A.J. Brown has had a tendency where he doesn't need a great quarterback to produce because you just got to get the ball in his hands on a deke and dunk, and he's going to go make something happen, and he breaks off big plays. He's a boom or bust receiver, and he's going to be boom or bust once again in the draft. If you're willing to take that risk in round 3, I don't hate it. I'm not a big risk taker that high in the draft. But
would you be more willing to draft A.J. Brown if you started your draft running back, wide receiver, and then he was your wide receiver 2,
yes,
as opposed to, like you started, Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara, and then you had Brown as your wide receiver 1?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
And that's the way it happened in our draft. I'm looking how it fell out
I'd feel fine going with A.J. Brown as my wide receiver 1. I would feel more comfortable as my wide receiver 2, obviously. I'm reading here that the Eagles don't have a single matchup this fantasy football season against a team defense that was ranked in the top 10 last year.
Yeah.
That's a fun thing to consider. That adds a little bit.
I would say they probably play in one of the easier divisions, if not the easiest division. Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people have them absolutely crushing everyone in this division and easily winning it at the end of the year.
Yeah.
They traded quite a bit of capital to acquire A.J. Brown in that draft. Titans were honestly ready to move on to Treylon Burks. But where it comes to really the pinning point of A.J. Brown is Jalen Hurts. It's really not so much A.J. Brown, right? Because we know how talented he is. It really just comes down to, do you believe in Jalen Hurts taking the next step up as a passer? And that can be both good and bad, because if he does improve as a passer, that's great for A.J. Brown and Goddard and Smith and everyone else in that offense. But that also might take away a little bit of value from Jalen Hurts in terms of how much he actually ends up running the ball.
Yep.
But if you're an A.J. Brown owner, I feel like you're already at that point where you think Hurts, in his 3rd season now, will take that maybe not leap, but at least a few steps forward and end up being at least a decent enough quarterback to get A.J. Brown the ball enough for him to produce on a weekly basis.
I think he will.
Can we talk about how Nick Chubb dropped to the 3rd round in our draft? And I understand that's where a lot of people have him, but
dropped is a strong word.
It's funny to say because
I'd like to see him in the 2nd.
He is on my worst values in the 2nd round.
Really?
Yep.
Yes.
I would agree with that.
In full PPR.
Can we talk about this right now?
Sure.
Yeah. I don't understand that, because Nick Chubb has shown before that he is a top 10 running back year after year, in the past 2 or 3 at least, and now suddenly he's in an offense that's going to continue to run the ball, doesn't have the passing prowess that it did last year. I mean, Jacoby Brissett is a bit of a drop-off for the first 11 games at least from what Baker Mayfield was, and I think they're going to rely on Nick Chubb for the first half of the season, is what my thoughts would be.
My concern is that he is easily extremely talented, right? And I'm not.
That's not a question.
I'm not comparing him to Damian Harris when I say this, but the avenue that this could go down is similar to what we saw with Damian Harris last year. Damian Harris had, I think it was maybe more than 14 rushing touchdowns, right? Played in an offense that was stagnant at some times, but Mac Jones was good enough to push the pace, and there was quite a bit of running back rotation there. My concern when it comes to Nick Chubb is are the Browns going to score?
Yeah.
And really how much the Browns and Brissett are going to be able to move that team down the field. Amari Cooper is now the wide receiver 1 there. We'll talk about Amari Cooper in a little bit. But when it comes to Nick Chubb, I could see a scenario where it's 17 rush attempts for 86 yards, 1 target, no catches, no touchdowns.
Nick Chubb has absolutely no floor in the receiving game. That is something I very painfully discovered last year. I was a Nick Chubb and Antonio Gibson owner in a league, and in our league, and that was not fun.
No.
And it's because Antonio Gibson and Nick Chubb would absolutely have big weeks. They had huge weeks, but then some weeks they don't get into the end zone. Antonio Gibson should be better as a passer or as a pass catcher, but for whatever reason they didn't use him that way. Nick Chubb doesn't get used in that way already. So with Nick Chubb, what concerns me is consistency. I do not see consistency for Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb has dealt with some injuries the past couple seasons too. I don't fully know if I can count on him to play an entire season. And Kareem Hunt is there, and Kareem Hunt is always taking touches, always doing stuff that, concerns me for the value of Nick Chubb. That's why I've got Nick Chubb at RB16. I wouldn't touch him in the second.
The injuries don't fade me as much. I have Nick Chubb right now in my running back rankings at 14. Like, I still, I have him behind Fournette and Kamara and Javonte and Aaron Jones. Like, I'm not very low on him. Like, I still have him in front of Zeke and in front of Breece Hall and in front of Travis Etienne. So I'm just in the range where I would rather go with one of my favorite upside wide receivers, like a Pittman, maybe like an A.J. Brown. If he starts to fall a little bit, DJ Moore, I'd still take over Nick Chubb right now.
Yep.
But I don't see myself really trying to go after Nick Chubb, loving if I end up drafting Nick Chubb. In the third round as your second running back, that's fine.
Absolutely.
But I can't envision a scenario where I start a draft with Justin Jefferson or Stephon Diggs, and my second pick is Nick Chubb.
I wouldn't want
and
that.
feel confident about that.
Yep,
I can't do that.
Yep.
Fair.
Let's keep this going. Right now in the fourth round, and there's absolutely no chance, I can tell, that we're going to get through every single player.
Well, we have 15 minutes.
Are we going to talk? Yeah, we have about 15 minutes left. Do we want to talk about the guys we don't like in rounds 1 and 2, or do we want to talk about the guys
I do want to talk about
4, 5, 6?
DK Metcalf. I do want to touch on DK Metcalf.
We'll totally see. I'll say in the fourth round, some of my values, Mike Williams, Travis Etienne.
Yep.
Those are two guys that I really love that you're able to get there. I have Mike Williams in our league as my number one wide receiver. I think this is the year that he surpasses Keenan Allen. I think we only saw a taste of what he can do once he strings along that consistency in that Chargers offense, because I only think Herbert's getting better.
Yeah, sure.
Then I think Mike Williams will be that team's number one target. Travis Etienne, everyone's talked about him at this point. We already know how great of a running back he is, how great he was in college, his rapport with Trevor Lawrence, and how Doug Peterson will utilize him in this offense as a PPR catching machine. So we don't really have to go into that.
Yeah.
But in the fifth round, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, who can continue that torrid pace from last year. He finished 22nd in the wide receiver range in terms of points per game. Absolutely incredible. I mean, he had that stretch really that won people championships at the end of last year. Jameson Williams is a little bit of a concern once he comes back healthy, and they added Chark. I don't think Chark takes away too much from Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's more of just a 6'4 red zone guy. I think Amon-Ra is still going to be able to get them down the field. Maybe 4 catches on a drive is very possible, and that could make it up right there for you as your wide receiver 2 or 3. But let's talk about DK
Metcalf in 5 career games with Geno Smith averages 19.2 fantasy points per game. That comes from StatMuse.
Who told you that one? Who brought this light to you?
Well, so you brought the light to me, but that stat comes from StatMuse. I looked this up because I was
I didn't invent
someone.
DK Metcalf stats.
You did not.
Year.
You did not. But no, but those weren't all from last year. So he had 4 games with Geno as the starter last year. 1 game in 2020 with Geno as the starter. But in those 5 games, 19.2 fantasy points per game. Last year, that would have finished clearly as a wide receiver 1. DK Metcalf is going in the 5th round, and he's DK frickin' Metcalf. He's what? Is this his 4th year? I think this is his 4th year. This is his 4th year. He's young. We know the talent's there. I mean, he's huge. He's fast. He's a great route runner. He can do everything that any wide receiver 1 needs to do. He's produced with his quarterback, and you can get him in the 5th round. Who else in all of time can you say that about, except maybe Michael Thomas?
And we'll talk about Michael Thomas probably in a little bit. But yeah, Jack, I'd love to hear your opinion on this because we've talked about this now ad nauseum. But DK Metcalf in the 5th round, to me, especially since he was a second-round pick last year, I think he's a great value in this spot as potentially your wide receiver 3 on your team.
He was my wide receiver 3.
Really, what it comes down to the concern is quarterback. But I do believe, I don't want to say I believe in Geno Smith, but I think that what we saw from last year is a good enough indicator to not freak out about Geno Smith starting for the value of DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett, I can't say the same. But DK Metcalf, Jack, what are your thoughts on him as a 5th round pick?
5th round pick, I'm absolutely fine with. I wouldn't bump him up to the 3rd. I think we have to be careful to say don't
react
to what we're saying.
I grabbed him in the
4th. I'm okay with too, based on how our draft board fell. A lot of receivers went early. I'm looking at our draft board right now. I really don't think 4th is a bad spot for him. Don't overreact. Don't take him in the 3rd because you don't need to. Because the risk is still there.
There is definitely risk associated with DK.
And we've seen him have his ups and downs, even with Russell Wilson, who's generally been Russell Wilson's also had his ups and downs, but he's going to be more consistent than Geno Smith. So fingers crossed that DK Metcalf's going to break out this year, but I'd still be weary drafting him. Don't bump him up to the 3rd. Keep him in the 5th. That's a great spot.
Or the 4th. Even the 4th.
There's reason to believe that, as great of a value that DK is, with that risk, I mean, if they're facing one of the top defenses, if they're going up against the Buffalo Bills at some point this year, there might be no time for Geno Smith to even think about where he's going to throw the ball before he gets absolutely obliterated in the backfield there. And B, he might be locked down. He is that team's number 1 target. It's very tough when you're the team's number 1 guy. Obviously, when you don't have the best quarterback to put the ball in a spot for you to win every single time to absolutely break the game, like we saw with Cooper Kupp. So there will be games where DK Metcalf maybe has 5 targets, catches 2 of them for 28 yards.
There's 2 sides to this. So first off, the Seahawks love to run the ball too.
That is also
they're going to continue to do that.
As long as Pete Carroll's there.
The other thing is they're going to be losing a lot.
Yes.
Which means DK Metcalf's going to get a decent amount of targets in
garbage time.
Yes, that's what we have.
Fantasy football is won and lost in garbage time. Football isn't, but fantasy football is. I mean, come on. You all have had that situation where garbage time comes around in a game.
100%.
You get that garbage time touchdown, it wins you the week. That's awesome. Real football, that sucks, because then all the fans of that team are like, great, why couldn't you have done that earlier? Fantasy football, that's what we live for. And garbage time is going to be something the Seahawks have a lot of.
Jack, in the 6th round here, A.J. Dillon was a name that I brought up earlier.
Yeah.
I think he's a value. You messed up. Do you want to talk about, do you think A.J. Dillon's a value in the 6th round? Is A.J. Dillon someone that you would look to even pair as a running mate with Aaron Jones on your fantasy team?
I would draft him with Aaron Jones. Yeah, there's no doubt about that in my mind.
Really? Would you start them both each week?
Because I think about it. Not week 1, but I'd think about it week 2 or 3. And that's the issue. In this 5th and 6th round, you have to really look at who are you going to... I guess the question becomes, is this going to be a starter on your team, right? And you're getting into that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range. You're getting into your flex range. So you're typically drafting your flex or your starting quarterback at that spot. My issue was I took Josh Allen and Darren Waller above him, and I probably shouldn't have done that at that point. But I was thinking I'd be able to get Dillon back on the turn in the next round, and it just didn't happen. People are valuing him highly, as they should be, and I think he's going to get a solid 40% carry share and a still very good offense, and he's going to see at least 3 or 4 targets a game. So based on that makes him a solid flex play in my mind.
Is Hollywood Brown going to be one of the wide receivers that we look back on this year saying, man, really should have drafted him?
No.
I don't think so.
Here's my thing. In Arizona,
in the 6th, I like it, though.
In the 6th, it's good. In Arizona, there are going to be, obviously, a lot of mouths to feed when DeAndre Hopkins comes back.
Even without DeAndre Hopkins, Rondale Moore, going into his 2nd year.
All right, you just traded for Rondale Moore. You're trying to hype him up right now. I don't want to hear from you.
Rondale Moore is good, too, though. So I'm not fully convinced that Hollywood Brown's going to be the wide receiver 1 coming out. The value I'm looking for in Arizona is in the later rounds. Is he on our list? He's not on our list. Zach Ertz is the guy that I'm looking at in the later rounds.
Zach Ertz is another person.
The first 6 games of the season, I think Zach Ertz is a top 6 or 7 tight end. I think after Hopkins, if he plays.
Because his status right now still is
Do you remember what happened the last time you convinced us to take Zach Ertz?
Yeah, that was the 1 year in Philadelphia that he didn't play well. But since then, he's been good again.
No, he was good. He was good last year.
He was really good.
And you're getting him in a good spot. So where did he go in our draft? He went in the 7th round, 8th round. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The 9th round.
That's what I'm saying. That's a value for Zach Ertz. And he's a red zone target there. Who are they going to throw the ball to in the red zone?
5'7" Rondale Moore, baby.
Yeah, or speedster Hollywood Brown. No, they're going to throw the ball to Zach
D-Hop.
Ertz.
I mean, when D-Hop comes
once
back.
D-Hop comes back, but that's still 6 games into the season. Everything changes 6 games into the season.
Or James Conner is going to get the ball in the red zone every single time.
Hollywood Brown, for the Baltimore Ravens last year, at the beginning of the season, was nothing short. I mean, Jack, everyone just saw you.
The 5 minutes.
The 5 minutes. The 5-minute warning here for me. This is what I see every time. Nothing short of phenomenal. I mean, just break it down. 19.4, 23.3, 8.3, 19.6, 33.5, 7.5, 19, 20.6, and then the rest of the season kind of fell off a little bit at the end there. That's when Lamar got, he was injured a little bit. He was missing some time. But really, Hollywood Brown feels like one of those guys that new team, elite quarterback. Truthfully, he still will have a very good quarterback throwing him the ball, and I do think he's this team wide receiver 1. When DeAndre Hopkins, for whatever he looks like when he comes back, there was clear signs of a drop-off last season.
Yep.
Clear signs of a drop-off.
Absolutely.
Regardless if he was hindered by an injury or whatever it was, he did not look the same. The same, at least from what you were drafting him as a second-round pick last year. He was never going to come close to that value for you, even if he played the full season healthy.
Yep.
Hollywood Brown, at a young age, now what is he, 24, 25 years old, comes into this new team in Arizona
with his college quarterback.
I think he takes up a lot of those vacated targets, at least from what Hopkins left, and really becomes this team's wide receiver 1. I unfortunately right now don't have him on many teams. I kind of wish I do, because I do think that he can be one of those guys that we look back on. I think Juju Smith-Schuster might be another one of those names that we look back on. Every year there's a pattern when it comes to fantasy football. It's really like a rhythm almost when it comes to drafting.
Yeah.
Whether it's a late round rushing quarterback that we've seen become a top 5 fantasy option over the past few years. This year I think it's Trey Lance. The past few years it's been Jalen Hurts. It's been Lamar Jackson. It's been Kyler Murray, and it's been Josh Allen. There's been a very distinct pattern when it comes to those guys. Same thing can be said when it comes to the wide receiver position. Stephon Diggs, even Keenan Allen when Justin Herbert became the full-on quarterback in that offense. Those guys were Deebo Samuel last year. Mike Williams last year.
Yep.
Mike Williams did a little bit of a different story because Justin Herbert became that good. But Deebo Samuel was that team's wide receiver 1 and was going in the 8th round.
Yep. Brandon Ayuk was often going above him. We had Brandon Ayuk above him.
And Jimmy Garoppolo really isn't even that elite of a quarterback, but was able to give Deebo Samuel enough of the target share, and Deebo kind of made it his own with his rushing ability and what he was able to do at the end of last season.
Yeah.
But even a Cooper Kupp with an upgrade at quarterback, not saying that Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray, one is truly better than the other as a passer and what really matters here. But I do think that Hollywood Brown is getting slept on a little bit and should be and might be one of those guys that we'll look back on and be like, man, he's a top 5 wide receiver right now. We could have had him in the 5th or 6th round.
There's a
kicking
chance.
ourselves.
There's a chance.
Kicking ourselves.
Absolutely. If he becomes that team's clear wide receiver 1, absolutely.
It's a big ask.
It's a big ask, but something that he's very capable from the past that we saw that he's able to pull off. I have a lot of names still on this list. We only got through the 6 rounds of some of the best values.
Should we move on to the worst a little bit and talk a little bit?
Well, you guys pick out maybe 2 names that you see on the worst list, or some guys that you just have in your own minds that you think are some of the worst values. And I just want to put this out there for everyone right now, because I think this is extremely important to hear. There is no one player that I am out on in fantasy football. There is not one player that I will say I won't draft him no matter what. Because every player has a price point where I'm in.
Yep.
Yep.
Every player has a price point where I am invested. Maybe it's 3 rounds later than where it's supposed to go. Maybe it's a round later than where
you drafted Elijah Mitchell in the 8th round. He fell so far. We don't like Elijah Mitchell.
That was probably a mistake. But there is no player in fantasy football that I'm going to go out there.
You put Elijah Mitchell. Oh, no, I put Elijah Mitchell on this list. But Elijah Mitchell's on this list in the 5th round as worst values.
Value does not mean bust.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to label anyone a bust because I think that's ludicrous. I think that's ridiculous.
You can't predict it.
To be able to say that this guy isn't going to do good. You can look at the past. You can name DK Metcalf a bust because of his quarterback.
Yep.
But we just disputed that with the stats that when he played with Geno Smith, he was almost a better wide receiver than when he was with Russell Wilson.
Absolutely.
There is no player I will name a bust. There is no player I won't draft depending on the price point.
Yep.
So with that, both of you, worst value that you've seen in drafts so far this offseason?
I got to go with Jalen Waddle in the 4th. If Jalen Waddle's going in the 4th and Tyreek is going in the 2nd, how in the world is Tua going in double-digit rounds? The math doesn't add up there. I love Jalen Waddle. He is so talented. I love Tyreek Hill. I'm a Chiefs fan. Tyreek Hill is like our best wide receiver of all time. Tyreek Hill is awesome. But Tua is their quarterback. They still have Mike Gesicki. They have Chase Edmonds, who is a very proven pass-catching running back. There is no way that both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle match the values they're being drafted at. If I'm going to drop someone, it's going to be Jalen Waddle.
Truthfully, if I want a piece of that Miami offense, I'm taking Tua.
Absolutely.
I'm taking Tua.
100%. I've taken Tua in some drafts. I will happily take Tua.
Jack?
So mine is... You guys aren't going to like this. Mine was actually... I also don't like the Miami Dolphins receiver, so that was going to be one of my main points. So I'll flip this a little bit here. but I really hate when new quarterbacks come in and can disrupt a first-round pick. And for me this year, that's Deebo Samuel. And I understand he has the running back value, but I think he's a great second-round pick. But him as a first-round pick...
Which you don't usually see.
No. I pulled him up the board.
Yeah.
Because I'll reach a round and a half for my guy.
But I've seen him in the first-round picks of mock drafts before. People love him because of the production, and they love the rushing value, and they love the throw, and they love the reception value.
Risky.
He was a top 3 wide receiver last year.
With Trey Lance there, the game's different. We don't know what we're going to see in the 49ers offense. Trey Lance could run the ball more than Deebo Samuel, probably will run the ball more than Deebo Samuel does. It's suddenly another running back to contend with in that offense. I'm more comfortable with Deebo Samuel in the late second than even the early second.
And when you look at ADP, especially on Yahoo and on ESPN, he typically goes around pick 23. So that is borderline first pick of the third round, depending on league size. Maybe even in the third round.
Yep.
So he is a mid to late second round pick, which I think that value is fine. But to reach for him in the first over some guys like Stephon Diggs, over some of the running backs that we mentioned.
I've got him at wide receiver 3. I really, really like Deebo
Can you explain,
Samuel
maybe just quickly explain why you
Because I'm going to bet on talent. Deebo Samuel is extraordinarily athletic. We saw what he could do with limited touches last year. And he's got a phenomenal offensive coordinator who knows how to use his players probably better than anybody else. I understand it's a new quarterback. There is definitely risk. But I'm betting on talent with Deebo Samuel. I think Deebo Samuel is more talented than any other player in the league, maybe. So I'm going to bet on that.
All right, and I think that's going to do it for us here today at the Fantasy Football Laboratory. Please remember, if you aren't signed up, sign up for UnderdogFantasy.com. Use code FFLAB, FFLAB, and you'll get your first deposit matched up to $100.
Wow.
Awesome. By Underdog Fantasy.
That's $103 right there.
It is $103, and you can join us and play against us. I mean, that is the best of both worlds right there. For the chemist Jack McGrath, Spitfire Lucas Parrish, I'm the king of trade Shane Palma. So long.